And I'm very excited to introduce my friend Rebecca Price Janney, an accomplished author. She's got several books up here. This book is a favorite of mine. It involves the Tennants. And tonight she's speaking on her newest book, East of the Sun, which takes place during the Korean War. You're all familiar with the TV show MASH, which took place, okay, this is a story about a MASH unit in North Korea. So Rebecca, come on up. Yay! Now, we need to pin this to you.
All right.
Where do you want to?
Thank you.
Keep going.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be with you all tonight. I've had a chance to talk to some of you, and I really want to thank Wendy for inviting me. I believe I was here, well, with the William Tennent House Association about 6 years ago, and that was when my novel Morning Glory came out. And as Wendy mentioned, it takes place during the First Great Awakening, and William and Catherine Tennant played a starring role in that story. And as I was researching it, Wendy showed me all the sites and shared a lot of her wisdom and knowledge about the Tennants and about the Log College and the William Tennent House Association during that process, which was really a great blessing to me, because I like to be able to imagine in my mind what I'm writing about. So I had some very tangible things in mind because of what she showed me and shared with me. You're probably familiar with the concept of 6 degrees of separation. The idea is that anyone in the world can be connected to somebody else by 6 or less links. And I think maybe this has happened to you. I know it's happened to me, that when I've been traveling, at times I can be in the most far-flung places from home, and I end up meeting somebody who went to my college or came from my hometown. If that's happened to you, think back to that incident and probably what you said to each other. It's a small world, isn't it? Well, I feel connected to the William Tennent House Association through my friendship with Wendy. We're both Presbyterians, women from Pennsylvania, at least you recently, or in previous decades. You're from Ohio, right? But you're from Pennsylvania. Okay. All right, so you are a Pennsylvanian. We have that in common. We both have intense links and interest in colonial American history. And my interest in the era actually goes back with my family, which first came to Pennsylvania in 1683 at the invitation of William Penn. They were German and Swiss Mennonites. And then in the 1740s, some of my other German Swiss ancestors came here and ended up settling in Bedminster in Bucks County. Tonight, I'm going to speak about a much less obvious connection to my 18th century research and your 18th century roots, but it still is a connection, and I will explain that to you. And that is my connection to the country of Korea and how the William Tennent House Association is also connected to Korea. Now, I have to tell you that although I'm very interested in Korea, it's not because of any ancestry. I've done my DNA, and I don't have any Korean ancestry at all in me. But I do, however, have a story about that. In the early 1990s, my husband, Scott, and I went on a trip to Israel with our church. And several times while we were there, I had to end up eating things like rice or bread because I inherited weak digestion from my mom's side of the family. And most of the time, the people on our trip were very sympathetic. They felt sorry for me because I was missing out a lot. And one night, however, I had my revenge. We ended up having, you've all heard of mystery meat? Nobody knew what the gray slabs on the platters were. However, there was talk behind people's hands that a certain camel hadn't been seen outside the hotel that day. We didn't know. That night, I had my bowl of rice, and I was feeling rather smug because nobody was eating anything else. A group of Koreans had arrived at the hotel that day, and this was to be their first meal in Israel. And they just sat there looking forlorn at this meat, not knowing what to do. And Scott had gotten to know the head waiter pretty well because of me. And he saw that the head waiter was very upset because he was really into hospitality. So Scott took him aside and he said, I know how you can make those Koreans very happy. And the maitre d' said, how? Please tell me, this is a terrible situation. He said, just give them each a little bowl of rice and they'll be very happy. Well, this man didn't know the meaning of little bowl of rice. Within about 10 minutes, vats of rice appeared on the table. And the Koreans were so happy. They started laughing and talking and eating, and everything was good. The waiter took Scott aside and he said, now I understand. Your wife, she is Korean. Obviously, my connection to Korea is not about ancestry, despite what that man said. So just how, as a historian who's very interested in early American history, did I end up writing a novel about the Korean War? As you may know, I've written extensively about 18th century America. I've had several novels published about it. I've written nonfiction accounts. It's what I love to write about. It's one of my specialties. And among those books is a series, the Easton series, which is 6 novels based on the life of my 6th great-grandfather, Colonel Peter Kishline, who was in charge of the Northampton County Flying Camp at the Battle of Brooklyn. And that was the first battle after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And the battle did not go well for the American side at all. My ancestor ended up being captured. He was wounded and captured and imprisoned with the remaining 30% of his army for many, many months in New York. So these books tell the story about how he went from being the sheriff of Northampton County in the 1760s to being a hero during the Revolutionary War. Those 6 books took me about 10 years to write. And when they came to a close in 2023, I was scheduled to begin a new series based on fictional descendants of the colonels and how they defended freedom through the remaining years of American history. The first book was supposed to take place during the Second Great Awakening, roughly beginning around the 1830s. So I was taking a step away from colonial American history and the Revolutionary War to the time of the Second Great Awakening. But as they say, the best laid plans often go astray. What happened next bumped me all the way up to the mid-20th century and drew heavily upon my connections to Princeton Seminary. During the years that I studied at Princeton, I became friends with many international students. And aside from meeting Scott there and marrying him there, that was the highlight of my time at Princeton, meeting those incredible people from all over the world. Among my friends were several Korean Presbyterian students, and our favorite professor was Dr. Samuel Hugh Moffett, who, along with his wife Eileen, had been missionaries in Korea for many years. His own association to Korea went back to 1890, when his father, Samuel Austin Moffett, became one of the very first Presbyterian missionaries to Korea. My professor's experiences, his deep faith, and his really strong connections to the land of the morning calm intrigued me. During our last year at seminary, Scott and I spent one entire semester preparing for really grueling exams. So that really occupied most of our time. But each night we would take a half-hour break and watch reruns of MASH. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the TV show MASH. And afterwards, I would talk to our Korean friends about the show. Most of them had never heard of it, but they were willing to talk to us about the Korean War and just how hard it had been for their families. They also told us about how important it was that those early Presbyterian missionaries brought Christianity to Korea and what a difference it made in their families' lives. So all those things helped me feel a certain bond and affection for Korea, something that was strengthened when Scott and I bought our first house in Montgomery County. I couldn't figure out in the first few weeks that we were there why I kept smelling Asian food. And I went through our refrigerator many times thinking maybe in the back of the refrigerator there were old cartons of Chinese food, but that wasn't the case. The mystery wasn't solved until we met our next door neighbors, John and Mary Kim, who were Koreans, and we lived in a twin house. And in the kitchen, we had a common vent. So the smell of their food kept coming into our kitchen. Mystery was solved. John happened to be a seminary student at the school where Scott was an administrator and where I ended up getting my doctorate a few years later. A few years after I got that doctorate, I ended up teaching at the seminary, and my specialty was teaching Korean seminary students, helping them get acclimated to life in America and the American classroom. So not only did we share some wonderful classes together, but they taught me a lot about great Korean food. Well, in 2013, my family and I moved out of the area for a little while, and I stopped teaching those classes. Over the next 10 years, I found myself immersed in writing about the Revolutionary War and my ancestor, Colonel Kishline. So my Korean connections at that point became a very fond memory. Quite out of the blue, in early September 2023, I had a vivid dream after watching an episode of MASH the night before. In it, there was an American nurse and a very badly wounded North Korean soldier who she thought wasn't who his uniform said he was. Their compelling story quickly unrolled in my mind. It just kept telling itself. And after a few days, I thought, wow, this would make a really good book. The thing was, I was already scheduled to write that book in the 1830s, but this one wouldn't stop. So I began to write it down. I began thinking, maybe I should do something with this, but maybe it'll come after that. I just couldn't make any sense of it, but I couldn't ignore it either. Normally, when I write a novel, I do extensive research first, and that takes me a few months. And then after that, I write a very thorough outline, chapter by chapter, from start to finish. And then I begin to write the book. That didn't happen this time. This book and these characters came almost fully developed. How, though, was I going to be able to tell my publisher that I would rather do this book in the 1950s rather than go back to the 1830s? I just didn't have the courage at that point. Even though I just couldn't shake this book, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a gift from God. Anytime I needed information about some aspect of Korean life or culture or the language, that person would be there. I just found myself bumping into people who had the answers. I also began drawing upon those long ago Korean connections that I had. By November, I still hadn't told my editor what was going on, but I knew one day when I got in the car, turned on the radio, and heard a Frank Sinatra song, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, I had my title and I had to tell her. So with trepidation, I contacted my editor and told her what had happened. She listened. She said, wow, this is intriguing. This doesn't happen very often. Let me talk to the publisher. So she did that, and they both agreed, no, this is where we should start the new series. So that's how East of the Sun came into being. There's a theme running through the book that I've touched on already tonight, and that's how people, places, and generations can be connected to each other, often in unexpected ways. My two main characters in the book are Shelby Kishline and Parker Tate, and they find themselves in what seems to be happenstance circumstances, what some might call coincidences. And without having ever met before, they feel a very strong connection to each other. As the novel unfolds, and I will give you a little spoiler alert here, as the novel unfolds, they learn that their grandfathers actually knew each other in Korea in the early years of the 1900s. I think that they could have said to each other, although I didn't put it in the book, it's a small world, isn't it? Right now, my editor has in hand and is working on the sequel to East of the Sun, which is actually a prequel. It's sort of like Star Wars. You know how it started with the third installment and then went backwards? This one is going backwards. And the book I'm calling Land of the Morning Calm takes place in the early 1900s with Shelby and Parker's grandfathers getting to meet each other and work together in Pyongyang, Korea, at the time of the Great Revival that happened there in 1907. Now, although Korea and William Tennent are usually never mentioned in the same sentence, the fact is that he paved the way for those missionaries to go to Korea. The Log College produced American-born pastors who took Presbyterianism way beyond that era's frontier line. That was missionary service. And they set a precedent for future missionary endeavors. Now, some of Tennent's graduates were founders of the College of New Jersey, which I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know it became Princeton Seminary, Princeton University. And Princeton was founded upon a very strong missionary spirit, and it was actually called, in its first 100 years, a nursery for missionaries. Samuel Blair, Gilbert Tennent, William Tennent Jr., Richard Treat, and Samuel Finley all had Log College connections, men who intended that Princeton would be a place that trained missionaries. Over a third of its early graduates, of Princeton's early graduates, went to areas that had no church presence. And in the latter part of the 19th century, the first Presbyterian missionaries to Korea, including Horace Grant Underwood, James and John Underwood, and Samuel Austin Moffat, all had Princeton connections. There's a well-known passage in the Bible about the sins of the fathers being visited upon the third and fourth generations. But the rest of that passage speaks of him showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. Those blessings are then visited upon more generations than anyone can ever imagine. Although my novels, East of the Sun and Land of the Morning Calm, only involve 3 generations, just think of how many generations the work of William and Catherine Tennant and Log College graduates have blessed. And now you are passing it on, continuing the story through the work of the William Tennent House Association. I began by speaking about the 6 degrees of separation. So here's how I would apply the concept to your connection to Korea. William Tennent helped establish Presbyterianism in this region. He founded the Log College to train American-born pastors. Those men ventured into the frontier with a missionary spirit, setting up churches and providing Christian education and nurture. They were instrumental in starting the College of New Jersey, which became Princeton. In the 19th century, Princeton became a training ground for Presbyterian missionaries abroad. And Presbyterian missionaries played a vital role in bringing Christianity to Korea. The truth is, you never know what kind of influence you personally or your organization will have upon later generations. Sometimes we get to see the fruit of our labors, and other times it comes to fruition after we're gone. Back in 2011, when I first began teaching those Korean seminary students, I asked them, why did you want to come to America, to leave your home and your families and study here? There are a lot of really good seminaries in South Korea, so why did you want to come here? One of them spoke for the rest, and he said, Americans introduced our country to Christianity, and then when we needed help the most, Americans came through for us to save us from communism during the Korean War and help us establish a vibrant new country. Now Americans are in trouble, and we want to come back and bless you with the faith that you brought to us. On that day, I could have really said to them, it is a small world after all. Thank you very much.